Hey, you're watching CAD Roll Hunter, and I managed to pick up a few penny albums. And when you take a look inside, it is chock full of oldies. We're going to look through and see if we find any key dates or gems. Stay tuned. Hey everybody, this is James and you're watching my channel CAD Roll Hunter. Every once in a while I get an opportunity to pick up parts of old collections like these small cent penny albums, these Whitman folders here, and you never know what's going to be in here. These ones all have pennies inside, and we can see clearly the key date 1925 is not in here, and we wouldn't really ever expect that. Even someone who has any small knowledge of Canadian coins might pull that out. But these are chock full of some really old stuff that we can't get. All these King George V cents, but all of these albums actually have many of the rest. You can see we've got varying degrees of circulated coins, some that are a bit dirty or have environmental damage, to some that are pretty BU here, which are pretty awesome. What we want to see is if we can find anything in here that is better than average condition, particularly these King George V coins. Can we find anything that might grade in a fine or higher? That would be awesome. And are there any crazy varieties that we should be looking for, like the 48s and 49s? We'll get into that. There might be some interesting things. So we got 3 full albums here that we want to look at. I'm going to go through them with you, and we'll see if we've got anything worth finding. I think I got a pretty good deal for these. I probably didn't get them for much more than face value. All these King George V pennies obviously have some value, but they might not be worth more than 50 cents if they're in average circulated condition. So we want to see if there's anything that's better than that. But you can see we got a bunch here. And like the last one, most of the last 2 pages, or these last 2 pages, are completely filled. And similarly, it's only the newest of the ones here that are in really, really nice condition. But did we get a good deal on these? I mean, I'm sure we did anyway. But we want to see if there's a hidden gem in here. And that's what you might want to find. This one has fewer of those King George V. And there's an empty slot here in the 37. But lots of pennies to look at. So we're going to get started looking at these King George V. We're going to just do this one album at a time. So we'll start at the top. This one has the most. And I'm going to pull them all out of here. And we're going to look at, particularly on these King George V, how we would know if it grades a little bit higher, an F or better. So we'll take a closer look at those because I think you might find that helpful. Okay, let's dig in. I'm going to pull all these out and we'll see what we've got. We might want to see what year this one is, the obverse coin. So there's our obverse coin. No surprises there. The 1932 is the most common year in the King George V, but this one here is in better than average condition. And I can see right away without even magnification. But what I'll do is throw this one under the scope, and then we'll talk about what are the points of the coin we want to look at to determine the grade. So here is our 1932 under the scope, and the main thing that I'm looking for, but we'll talk about more of the markers, is really just the band of the crown. In a VG, the top of the band of the crown is going to be worn away, and as it gets closer to a fine, an F, we start to see the full band of the crown. And on this particular coin, we can see that. This tells me this coin is a little bit better than the average circulated coin, which I would say is, in my experience, in a VG or a very good condition. Now, I am not a professional coin grader, but there are a few tools that I use that you might find helpful. The first, of course, is a microscope, and I use this pluggable USB microscope. It's pretty cheap. You can get it on Amazon. I think it's under $50 Canadian. I think it's under $40 US. It just plugs into my computer by USB, and I can put it up on the big screen. If you've got a bigger screen, this is really helpful. My eyes aren't great, but it gives us an opportunity to see the details of the coin that you can't just see with your bare eyes. So that's one thing. And I always have my Charlton Standard Catalog of Canadian coins handy too, and it has a description of grading here for each of the monarchs. So I can look up George V, I can see the high points of the coin, and a verbal description of each of the grades, what you'd be looking for, which is really helpful. But there's one other tool that you might find useful as well, and that is the Coins in Canada website with a video grading guide. I'll show you how to find it on the website. So here is the coinsandcanada.com website. And on the menu, you want to go to Canadian coins and then grading. And basically, it's a photo grading guide. So you can see examples of each of the different grades to compare against your own if you're not feeling so confident about reading the descriptions in the Charlton Guide. This is helpful. An interesting thing to note is that not every coin in the same grade is going to look the same. If I scroll through, for instance, these F12 coins, what we're going to find here is that each one looks a little bit different. This one has a little bit more wear on the band of the crown, very similar to the one that we have, except I think we've got a little more detail. You can see it just behind there. This one has the full band, so you just have to use your judgment. These ones here have more of the band, but generally speaking, you're looking at not just the band of the crown. There are other things. Is there damage to the fields? How much detail is there on the rest of the portrait and such? But we'll look a little more closely at what we want to look at. Primarily when we're grading Canadian coins, we're looking at the obverse, the portrait of the monarch. And specifically on these King George V, what we want to pay attention to is the highest points of the portrait design, because that is where we're going to see the wear first. So the high points on the obverse with the George V is the band, pearls, and jewels of the crown, the mustache and beard to the right of the ear. We want to look at the eyebrow, the ear, and the nose, and the Order of the Garter ribbon bow. So that's a bunch of things that we want to look at. And the higher the grade, the less the wear. The lower the grade, the more the wear. And in some cases, in the lowest grades, some of these devices are worn away completely and we can't see any detail whatsoever. Okay, I've got them all stacked up here. And we're going to go through them fairly quickly because we got a lot of coins in these albums to go through. But I've got this one here. We'll throw them all under the scope. So this is the 1920. This is the first year small cent. And I don't particularly look, when I want to do sort of a fast grading of these coins, I don't particularly look at all of the devices. I primarily look at the band of the crown. That is the highest point of the coin. That's really what I want to focus on. And we can see most of the band of the crown, but the jewels are pretty obliterated. This might be average circulated condition. This is probably about a VG. Next one up here is the 21. Got a bit of rim damage. We want to take that into account here. When we flip it over, it's got a bit of a scrape, but you can see there's definitely more detail there. Aside from that rim damage, this is probably just a little better than average circulated condition. Next up is a 27. So we skipped all of the dates that are lower mintage, 23, 24, 25, 26. If we got any of those, they're more valuable pretty much in any condition. The 25 being, of course, a hard to find one, the 23 being a hard to find one. But 1927, you can see these are all circulated in brown condition. This one probably about a VG. Lot of wear on that crown. We're just looking to see if we can find a gem. There is a 28. Again, pretty soft at the center there. Definitely a VG, no less than that. There's a 1929. We definitely want to find the high 9 variety. And the real marker of that is if the tail of the 9 is about level with this 2, the 9 sits higher, that is a harder to find variety. This is the low 9. This is the standard regular one. But let's see what the obverse condition is like. And I'd say we got most of the band of the crown there, the whole thing. I'd say this is probably an F12. So that's cool. That's a little bit better than average. Here is the 1930. Probably close to that. About average. This is what you would expect for these. These were, when people were putting these albums together, they were just taking coins out of circulation to fill a spot. They weren't particularly looking for the best ones. This one has more detail, but it might have some damage. It's hard to tell. This might be some streaks on the surface of the coin because it doesn't actually, you can see those brighter streaks actually on the field. It's possible that might have actually also been scraped. We're seeing it more on the high points. But actually pretty good detail here. The 1932, this is the second 1932. We can see the full band. We can see some of the jewels. That's definitely in an F. Probably a little bit better than average. There's our 33. Now, as they get newer, we can see more and more detail. So this is definitely in the fine range, and you can see the jewels a lot better than we can in the older ones. So that might be our best one so far, which shouldn't be a surprise. Here is a 34. And that's got some pretty good detail as well. Let's see how we do with the rest here. A couple more to go, 35. That's probably about average. And our 36, there's one other thing we want to check for on that one. We got the full band, we can see some jewels, that's good, that's definitely in the fine range. But does it have a dot? That's one of the storied coins in Canadian coinage, numismatics, is the 1936 dot. There'd be a little dot right here. There are only, I think, 3 maybe that have been discovered. If we found it, that would be incredible. It would be worth a fortune. So album number 2 is also missing the key dates here. We're not going to find those, but we'll pull all these out and see if we can find our gem. We found a few in here that were just a little bit better than average. What we're hoping for is maybe there's one that's a lot better than average. You just never know until you pull them out and get a closer look. All right, here is our second album coins. Starting off again with that first year 1920. And pretty worn. This is an average circulated condition King George V. This is what most of them look like. Not a lot of detail. They've been circulated for a long time. That's not the one we're looking for. We got a 1921 here. Pretty circulated, some scuffing. These really are what you would expect to find in any of these albums. This one's got a bit of a rim ding, but more detail on the crown. We got 2 1929s in this. The obverse coin was a 1929 and the date was facing out. So this one here we can see is the low 9 variety. A pretty decent detail on that one as well. This is the other one. What's this one going to be? Still the low 9. And that one's got more detail for sure. So that is definitely in the F range. It looks good. We can see that bow there. We can see the mustache. All the detail is there. So that one looks actually pretty good. 1930. It looks pretty trashy. Yeah, definitely some environmental damage. And this is also par for the course, for sure. Same here with this 31. It looks pretty dark and toned. But this is what you got to do. You can't find a gem if you don't look in detail. There's 1932. That looks pretty good. Lots of detail there. See how this 33 fares. Oh, starting to look pretty good. Again, like we can see some signs of circulation, some scuffing. Who knows where this was before it got into this album. There's a 34. Something odd going on there. There's a fair amount of detail, but definitely some wear on that crown. And our 35. Yeah, that's pretty circulated. And our 36. Yeah. Oh, I was going to say no dot. There's something on there, but that is not the dot. But it's in the right spot to make me pause for just a moment and think, have we found a gem? It looks like just to be a bit of damage. And that looks like a pretty average circulated VG as well. So I've just looked through our last album, and our obverse coin was a 1932, and pretty much the best detail we had was this one here, and the worst was this one right here. Pretty worn, pretty circulated. So we didn't really find any gems there, but you know, I have found gems in albums before. I've done a few videos like this in the past and found a couple that were really nice, both in nickels and in pennies. And so you just never know until you pull that coin out and actually look at the obverse. You just can't tell. And unless a dealer or someone who has purchased these or wherever you got them has done the same thing, they're not going to know either. So you never know if something's going to be overlooked. What we want to do is then look to see if we've got any varieties in the rest of the coins in here. So we're not going to look at all of the dates. You can see most of these are just average circulated coins, but we're going to look at some key ones for some key varieties that might be interesting. I've gone ahead and pulled out the years we particularly want to look at: 48, 49, 53, 54, 55, 65, and 67. And then I got a 1961 here I want to show you because there are some varieties we can find on many of these years. And I pulled this one out and we've got it. So we'll start with the 1948. We're looking at the obverse of the 1948, and there are three varieties you can find. There's the A pointing to a small denticle, an A pointing to a denticle, and an A pointing between denticles. And the one we really want to find is the A pointing to a small denticle. In a VF, it's worth at least $10, and you might have paid a penny for it. This one here, what we're looking at is the A pointing between two large denticles. So this is the average ordinary one. So, but we've got a few to scope. So we'll look at the next one here. And this is A pointing to a large denticle. So that's also fairly common. And this next one is the A also pointing to the large denticle. So we got a couple varieties of the 1948, just not the one we were hoping to find. Here's the 49. There are two varieties. There's the A pointing to and A pointing between denticles. The one we're looking for is the A pointing to denticles in a VF. That's probably about a $15 coin. This is the more common variety. We can see that here, but we'll check the three we've got. There is A pointing between, and this one here, also A pointing between. So all three are the common one, but you want to check them all because I have found examples of both the 48 and the 49 because these varieties, a lot of collectors were pretty casual about it, and these varieties might not have been known for many years or by many collectors. So that's why you can find these even in a circulated condition, even in an album that you buy from some collection. In the 1953, what we're particularly looking for is the shoulder fold variety. And it's really hard to tell on circulated coins if there is that shoulder fold or shoulder strap or whatever you want to call it. The best way to find it is looking at the obverse lettering. This is the no shoulder fold. This one has pretty flared serif. The eye particularly you can look at on Die Gratia. You can see it's got these pointy ends. The shoulder fold will be a pretty slim eye and you won't see those points. The shoulder fold variety, by the way, would be about a $25 coin in an MS60. So this is not an MS60, but it would still have some value if we found the shoulder fold. So we're gonna look at all of them and see. This one is also the no shoulder fold. And the same here. So we didn't get it this time, but you always want to look. Now here's the obverse of the 1954, and this is the shoulder fold variety, and that's what that eye looks like. You can see it doesn't have those pointy bits. If I go down to the shoulder, you can barely see. You can't really even see. It's just a tiny little bit here because this coin is so worn. That's why looking at the obverse legend is very helpful. It's the easiest way to identify what one you have. So the thing to know about the 1954 is that the shoulder fold variety was the commonly circulating variety. The no shoulder fold was really only issued in proof-like sets. We're not likely to find it. If you found it in a proof-like condition, it's so rare, it's a couple $1,000s. If we found it in a circulated condition like this, somebody would have had to take it out of a set and circulate it. It would still be a very valuable and rare coin. But this one here, this is the average ordinary circulating shoulder fold. But we got a couple more to check and you just never ever know. So never say never, I'd say in the coin roll hunting world. That's a slim eye, that's the shoulder fold. And this last one here, same thing, also the shoulder fold. Here's the 1955, same story. The no shoulder fold is the rare one. And it would be in a mint state 60, about $800. And this coin here, I would say, is in a mint state 60. Look at all the detail on here. And in fact, when I go down, you can clearly see the shoulder fold here, that strap, those lines. When it's not a circulated coin, you can easily see it. When it's circulated, that's a high point of the coin. It gets worn down. This is actually a beautiful coin. We're going to flip it over and look at the reverse here, 1955. Beautiful condition. The fields are nice and clean. It's got some fingerprints and it's got a little bit of, I'd say this is red brown. It's starting to turn a little bit, probably just from the environment, but that is a really nice 1955. That might upgrade in my own collection. I'd have to see. I don't have a lot of red Canadian pennies, so this is a really cool one. But we'll look at the other ones. This one here is also not too bad. This is also the shoulder fold. And this last one, which is pretty circulated, also the shoulder fold, but here you can see it's much, much harder to tell at the shoulder. This one's got some corrosion, environmental damage. If we had found the rare one here, that would be a real shame. But again, I would take it anyway. Now, there are 4 varieties of the 1965, and they all have to do with the 5 itself being either pointed or blunt. And this is the blunt one. The pointed 5 almost comes right to the stem of this maple leaf. And the beads, you want to look at the A in Regina, and the small beads, the A is pointing between 2 small beads. That's what we have here. The large bead, the A is pointing to a larger bead. These are the small beads. So this is the blunt 5 small bead. It's a common one. What we really want to find, the most valuable, is the large beads pointed 5. This is an interesting one. So this is also the blunt 5, but it really looks like it's a weak strike. And I say that because the rim denticles almost look like beads on the top of the coin. And some of the detail looks pretty soft, even though the coin has mint luster and doesn't really show any signs of circulation wear. It's probably a very weak strike, but that is also the blunt 5. We've got a few more to check here. Blunt 5 as well. Blunt 5. And blunt 5. And I'll see if we have any that happen to be the large beads. These all look to be perhaps the small bead. That's a small bead. And that, my friends, is the large bead. This A is pointing to the large bead. So we got a couple different varieties, both the blunt 5, but we got the small bead and the large bead. So that's cool. You want to find these varieties, you have to scope them. They're so hard to see. Last up is the 1967. We got a few nice examples here. And what we're looking for is 2 kinds of doubling in 2 different places. One is some die deterioration doubling that you can see on the legend here. We don't have it on this one, but it can be pretty prominent, even on these perfectly uncirculated coins. This one has some fingerprints, but it's otherwise still in pretty decent condition. But if I flip this one over, you can see actually how uncirculated this coin is. The other doubling we're looking for is rotated hub doubling. It's actually a true doubled die, which is very rare in Canadian coins. And we would see it on the legend here. Particularly, we'd see double serifs on the G. We'd see some doubling. It spreads more as you move across the legend there, a rotated hub doubling. But we don't have it here. A shame for these fingerprints because this is actually an uncirculated coin that somebody's put in their collection, but they obviously manhandled it or woman-handled it as soon as they got it and put it in the album. We'll quickly look through the rest here. No doubling on that. Do we have any doubling on the legend? I don't think so. No doubling there. And I have found these. I have a video where I found 25 where there was prominent doubling on this legend in a roll of uncirculated 1967s that I was fortunate enough to get. Nothing there and nothing there, which is what you'd expect. But again, you got to check them all. And here's the last thing that you want to look for. This is actually the obverse coin in one of the books. I pulled it out and it was a pretty nice looking laureate portrait. So I wanted to see if it showed signs of the hanging 1 or the hanging last digit that was caused by a die clash, and it does. So this is pretty common through the 50s and the 60s. You'll want to check them all. It's particularly easier to see on more uncirculated coins like this one. And you can see this little mark here. That's an impression that was left on the reverse die by the obverse die. Flip it over here, and what that was an impression of the queen's chin on the other side of the coin. And so this happened in many years. It's actually quite common. So this is the 1961 hanging 1, as it's called, because it almost looks like that last digit is hanging from this little mark here. It looks more like that for larger digits, like a 3 or a 5 or an 8 or something like that. But this is it. Sometimes you can get more than one impression on the coin. I have found double, triple, and even quadruple hanging coins. And that's where that die clash hit multiple times and left multiple impressions just in a slightly different spot from the one here. So I'm going to look at all of them. I will spare you that to see if we find any more of these hanging digits, and I'll show you if we find any more. So I looked through the coins and I'm pleased to say that we found some of these hanging digit varieties. There's the 1961 example that I showed you earlier. If we look at this 1959, it's a little harder to see. It's got some damage above the 5, but what you want to see is that line above the 9. So that's the 1959 hanging 9. And then next up is a 1963 hanging 3. And then last but certainly not least, we've got a 1962 here, and this is actually a double hanging 2. You can see 2 of these impressions above the 2. So those 2 dies struck without a planchet in the chamber at least twice to leave those impressions on there. So that's what we've got. We found some cool varieties. And interestingly, this one also seems to be sporting a bit of metal accumulation around the 2 here. Interesting. Doesn't make this coin necessarily any more valuable than it otherwise would be, but it's a nice coin in probably a low mint state with a variety, and that's really, really cool. Well, I got to bring you back in. Wouldn't you know it, there was one I missed. I was just taking the rest of the coins out of the album and realized I hadn't checked the 1962s, put them under the scope, and here is a normal 1962. But if I just slide this next one over, we have the harp variety. Now, the lighting makes it a little bit difficult to see, but what we're looking at there, you can see it a little bit better there, are these lines coming down from the 1. This is called the harp. The guitar variety, just these strings as it is, would come down further right down to the leaf. So that's a really cool variety, and it has some value. I almost missed just highlighting how you got to take a peek at everything so you don't miss anything. That's a really cool one to find. Well, I hope you enjoyed that look at some older Canadian coins that I picked up in some old albums here. And, you know, it's always fun looking through some of these older coins, particularly that we're not likely to find in circulation in our coin roll hunts. They're harder to come by. They're far more scarce. And we didn't find anything spectacular, but that's the way it goes. You got to keep looking, so have patience. And you never know, one day you're going to look at a coin in the scope and go, oh my goodness, that's the one. And that's just the way it works. So if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, a like. I'd appreciate that. And of course, as always, I really appreciate you watching. If you haven't already subscribed to my channel, CAD Roll Hunter, please hit that subscribe button. You'll be notified when my new videos are coming out. I have new videos coming out all the time. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again next time. The sponsors of today's video are Lighthouse Canada and the Charlton Press. Lighthouse Canada is the leading supplier of high-quality numismatic supplies in Canada, and the Charlton Press is the leading publisher of coin and paper money catalogs and price guides for Canadian collectors. Go check out their online stores today and use the exclusive discount code CRH20 for 20% off all your purchases.